We are anonymous. We are a legion. We do not forget. We do not forgive. Expect us.
Internet service providers plan censorship strategies for all customers by 2014. Prevent disease. When censorship fails, there is always a fallback strategy to muzzle the population, going straight to the source. In this case, internet service providers (ISPs) are the companies that offer users around the world access to the internet. There are many websites which pursue censorship strategies to prevent specific information from getting through to the public domain. Google, Facebook, YouTube are among many of the largest sites in the world which employ sophisticated information suppression techniques. The problem is, it hasn't worked very well, so ISPs now plan to block specific websites and search terms they consider offensive under the guise of initiatives to block pornography and other sexually offensive material. But it won't stop there. Just 2 years ago, a University of British Columbia professor made headlines when he stated that censorship has become a worldwide norm and that new laws will control what you read or see on the internet. Not many paid attention to him, but they are now. Ron Deibert, Ph.D., University of British Columbia, is Associate Professor of Political Science and Director of the Canada Centre for Global Security Studies and the Citizen Lab at the Munk School of Global Affairs, University of Toronto. As a political scientist at U of T, he was involved in several collaborative cyberspace R&D projects. He is also a co-founder and a principal investigator of the Information Warfare Monitor and OpenNet initiative projects. Mr. Deibert will be speaking at South Carolina Congress, Canada in June. We hold a mirror to state-based and other forms of internet filtering, going back to 2002, he said. Every year we test in over 70 countries using field research and technical interrogation methods. Generally speaking, in the early part of 2000s, governments either didn't care or were oblivious to what was happening on the internet. Today censorship has become a worldwide norm. In addition, countries are applying next-generation controls. They're engaging in offensive activities and surveillance, implementing new laws that bring in a climate of censorship, and in some cases forcing ISPs to do the policing for them. By controlling the flow media, nations have learned how to control the flow of information, regardless of whether it's attempting to convince the masses that the sun is bad for us or mercury, radiation, plutonium and pesticides are good for us. They're all lies to manipulate public opinion. China has taken things one step further, which could be a sign that other nations will follow in due time. Prime Minister David Cameron has announced that by the end of 2013, most households in the UK will have pornography blocked by their internet provider unless they choose to receive it. The new measures will apply to both existing and new customers. Mr. Cameron also called for some horrific internet search terms to be blacklisted, meaning they would automatically bring up no results on websites such as Google or Bing. He also warned he could have to force action by changing the law, and that, if there were technical obstacles, firms should use their greatest brains to overcome them. Does this sound familiar? What Cameron is not revealing is that the technical infrastructure for internet censorship has been planned worldwide for more than 8 years in the US, Canada, UK, Australia and several other developed nations, and it won't stop at pornography. For example, the largest industries in the world will be able to bid to have specific terms axed, and it will be as simple as adding those terms to complex algorithms to ensure they don't produce results from websites which contain negative information about their products or services. Want to find out more about the dangers of pasteurized milk? Or what about information related to vaccines and the relationship to autism? Genetically modified foods. They will all be axed, or the filters will steer the user towards information that floods results with opinions from the mainstream arena. True health claims for a natural health will be restricted. It doesn't matter what textbooks or research may say. If ISPs are instructed to X a specific term or series of terms, you simply won't see them come up. This is an act of censorship, in violation of the freedom of thought, belief, an expression guaranteed by the constitutional rights and freedoms of every nation. Analysts who study technology trends see censorship happening all over the world. This is not something confined to strictly one or two nations, said technology expert Wilfred Pand. The US, Canada, and Europe are all seeing some level of censorship on the internet and television, which prevents users from seeing or hearing specific information their governments do not want them to hear. Even the most open, democratic governments have sought laws and new forms of surveillance that many see as a new wave of censorship, and that includes the United States. The U.S. government asked Google for data on its users more than 31,000 times in 2012 alone, for example. And the government rarely obtained a search warrant first, Google recently revealed. In nearly all cases, the company ended up turning over at least some data. The heightened surveillance is enforced under the guise of protecting intellectual property rights, preventing cyberespionage, fighting child pornography, and protecting national interests such as nuclear power plants from hackers. The Canadian government proposed Bill C-30, known as the Protecting Children from Internet Predators Act. Proponents claimed the measure was designed to combat the exploitation of children, but it required internet service providers to create monitoring systems that would allow the police to intercept and track all online communications, without a warrant. The public reaction was so fiercely opposed to Bill C-30 that Canadian authorities were forced to withdraw it earlier this year. Just last month, Australia's corporate watchdog admitted to inadvertently blocking access to about 250,000 innocuous websites in addition to the 1,200 it had already accidentally censored. ASIC made the concession in a statement at an Senate estimates hearing after it caused controversy by interpreting a 15-year-old law in the Telecommunications Act as giving it the ability to block websites. When we started, there were only a handful of countries that filtered internet content. Now there are over 30. Many are imposing requirements on ISPs to filter access to content. Not only is it legitimate for governments to intervene, but also they're becoming more aggressive. Which leads to another factor, the militarization of the internet. There's a lot of hype and exaggeration about the idea of cyberwar. Yet there's a ripple effect. With the creation of the U.S. Military Cyber Command, it is now overt. What's different is that armed forces of governments are tasked with building doctrines to fight and win wars in this domain, said Mr. Deibert. Many of these governments are looking to the underworld of cybercrime to give them an advantage. Both the attacks on Estonia and Russian-Georgian conflict involved the exploitation of cybercrime that were directed by Russian authorities, and also piled on by well-known criminal botnets. There is an arms race in cyberspace, and criminals are caught up in it. Now we have huge Cold War behemoths partaking. That alone is an important force. Not just in terms of how the market is organized by defense expenditures, but also by the technology, deep packet inspection or computer exploitation tools. At least 4 countries including Canada, the United States, Australia, and the UK plan to ensure the ISP blocks are in place by 2014. Why is this happening? Because the greatest powers that run the mainstream media expected that people would continue to prescribe to the doctrine of television, which is completely owned and controlled by corporatism. However, the internet is now overtaking mainstream opinion. It's a game changer of monumental proportions. People are finding out the truth by the millions, and it's spreading like wildfire on the internet. Isn't it too late then to implement this strategy? I would state a resounding yes. It is subtly communicated that one should stay within the collective and never challenge the message, for doing so may be considered an aggression towards culture. The message is, be a good consumer. Always obey authority. You know nothing. Listen only to experts. Be content and never question or express new ideas. This signal is being broadcast across millions of screens, indoctrinating the unconscious minds of those who choose this as their only reality. Self-censorship occurs when these individuals become so deeply indoctrinated that they are afraid to discuss any information outside the paradigm. of television-created culture. They